All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Leanne Pissarro. I am so excited to have you all here today. I am with the Hidden Opponent, and we are super honored to be partnering with our friends at Honorarium for this awesome International Women's Day event. We're going to be talking about all things equity in sports and NIL. And I'm really excited to actually learn more because, frankly, I do not know much about NIL, and this sphere is a little dizzying for me. I'm a couple years out of college, but it's really interesting to think about this new world that we're kind of stepping into with NIL legislation. To start, I would love to kind of poll the group and see if you are currently using NIL. So your name, image, and likeness, have you been capitalizing on this? Feel free to drop in a yes or a no into the chat. We can kind of get a gauge as to if our audience is using it. Couple more people trickling in as well. All right, got some yeses, some nos, a little, not that much. Cool. Second question, out of curiosity, how confident are you in your understanding of NIL? Do you have no idea what this is? Are you coming in with a little experience, or are you really confident in your understanding of NIL? Let's kind of gauge the room as far as how confident are we in our understanding of this legislation. 5 out of 10. I like that. Maybe we can do a scale out of 10. Shout out to Gabby for that. Some 5s out of 10, so about halfway. 6 out of 10. A lot of in the middles. Cool. I personally would put myself at like a 3, maybe. I frankly do not know much. So hopefully I will be learning alongside with y'all tonight. And last chat, drop in there, if you could pick like 1 or 2 words, how did you feel when you first heard the news about NIL legislation going through? How did you feel? Were you excited? Were you anxious? Were you nervous, confused? What kind of feelings were associated with that moment of, wow, okay, NCAA athletes can now capitalize on this? Great answers. Surprised, nervous and anxious, excited and nervous, jealous because I missed the boat. It's probably a graduate, right? Excited, new opportunities, interested, excited and confused at the same time. I think those are all very, very valid emotions. I was definitely confused, unsure, but also excited. Also definitely a little jealous that I missed the boat myself. Although I don't know how much I probably would have capitalized on it when I was an athlete. But yeah, I think all those feelings are definitely wrapped up into this. And as we kind of navigate this new sphere, it'll be important to kind of keep in touch with ourselves and how we're feeling about it all. And kind of work towards kind of an authentic version of ourselves in this world of NIL too, I think is really important to that mental health conversation, right? So I'm excited to be here with Katie from Honorarium. They're one of our partners at the Hidden Opponent. They are way more the experts on NIL, and she's going to share a little bit more about what is going on with this sphere. And then we'll get to an amazing panel with our panelists, Megan, Ellie, and Sabrina, and we'll get to talk to them about their businesses, what their life's like as student athletes, and how they're navigating this sphere. So I'll kick it to Katie for a little bit more of behind the scenes.
Awesome. Thanks, Leanne. Thanks so much for your partnership. Really excited to be here. I'm going to share my screen with everyone. And as we get started, happy International Women's Day. It's a big day. If you are not familiar with International Women's Day, it started in 2011, really with the ethos of trying to bridge the gender pay gap. And it has morphed into a really kind of exciting day that people celebrate, and we're really excited to be celebrating this here with you guys, with everybody on the call. Also, every year there's a theme, and this year's theme is embrace equity. So we're going to really dive into the equity of NIL, but also kind of talk about NIL as a whole. So I appreciate Leanne for setting the stage and kind of digging into our audience and helping us gauge where we're at. At this point, can everyone see my screen? Awesome. I see some thumbs up, so thank you. We're going to cover 4 things in our discussion today, and I really want to make it a discussion. I've gone through this presentation now a few times, and it changes every time. And really, what I'd love to do is keep it open for everybody on the call, and we'll ask some questions. We'll look for some live participation. We've got lots of people in the audience today. We've got student athletes at the college level, at the high school level. We've got college administrators, we've got high school administrators, we've got parents, coaches, we've got people that work in the business of sports. So there's a lot of expertise in the room, and a lot of different views. So what we'll do is we'll set the stage, or set the table, essentially with the basics of NIL, just because there are a lot of different people and want to kind of baseline everything. We'll then look at the ecosystem of NIL. We'll talk about equity in NIL, and then maximizing NIL from an equity standpoint. And then it will be exciting to kind of flip it over to our student and entrepreneur panel and have them talk about some creative and equitable ways to really maximize NIL further for current student athletes. So we're going to dive in, and I promise I won't talk for 25 minutes straight. I can do it, but you guys probably don't want to hear me talk for 25 minutes straight. So let's start with the basics. NIL stands for name, image, and likeness. If you didn't already know, but I'm pretty sure most people on this call know that already. And as of July of 2021, the NCAA ruled that all 500,000 student athletes can now financially benefit from their own name, likeness, and image. This is a huge change that has caused major disruption in college NIL or college athletics. And I think some people are feeling that disruption now. And since the initial interim policy that came out, there's been some additional guidance that's been rolled out. So we'll talk about that a little bit too. But at the baseline, there's not a lot in the initial policy, but there's really 4 key takeaways from that. And the first is it prohibits pay for play. So I think most people at this point know that you can't pay for performance. You can't accept money for performance. So super basic at this point. Also, there must be a quid pro quo in place. So that means that there needs to be a transaction, whether it's a service or an action that takes place or a product. Also, this is a big one. Inducements are prohibited as well. And inducements is a fancy legal term, and I am not a lawyer. So essentially what that means at the root of everything is you can't accept money for enrollment at a school. So someone can't say, or you cannot take money to go to a school. Now, there is some gray area that is discussed in certain circles of NIL and college athletics around staying at a school and money for that. We're not really going to dive into that, but the policy really is no pay for play. There needs to be a quid pro quo, and you can't accept inducements. And the other thing that the initial policy kind of highlighted is that schools and student athletes also need to comply with state law. So the laws within their states. So that's the beginning of NIL. Since then, there's been some additional guidance. In October of this year, the NCAA rolled out additional guidance that expanded schools' involvement in NIL, amongst other things. But some of the key takeaways were schools are now able to provide stock photos and assets to student athletes and NIL providers. Also, they are able to provide space on campuses for student athletes or for student athletes to meet with either vendors or brands to conduct NIL activities. And then most recently, about a week and a half ago or so, there's been some additional oversight, more so on the collective side. And I am in no way, shape, or form a collective expert. And we could do a whole conversation on collectives. We may scratch the surface, but essentially what the new new information that was rolled out said that collectives need to be treated the same as sponsors or other sponsors, and cannot get special privileges for certain things. So there's a lot more to that, there's a lot more to the guidance that is out there, but those are kind of the high points. So let's talk NIL deals in general and some of the do's and don'ts. So in order to participate in an NIL deal or NIL activity, there needs to be an agreement or a contract in place. I will do X for Y and I will get paid for this. And that's really just good business acumen anyways. But I would be leery of anyone that comes to you and says, oh, I have this opportunity for you, but there's no type of agreement or contract that is in place between both the athlete and whoever is bringing the opportunity. There are definitely some clear do nots, and we talked about this already. Pay for play. You can't be incentivized to go to a school. The other thing that we didn't really cover is the use of logos and marks. In most cases, schools are still not letting student athletes use their marks and logos, but there are schools like Loyola Chicago and St. Bonaventure that are pretty open to allowing student athletes to use their marks and logos in NIL activities. We'll talk about some innovative ways that other schools are getting around that later in the presentation, but as a student athlete, it's probably very important to know your school's policy on that. And also, just make sure that if you are entering into an agreement with a company or a brand or whoever, that you're utilizing the marks and logos in the right way. And then the other thing, and this is more on the positive side, don't assume that only star players are getting NIL deals. There's one Division III athlete that has done over 70 different deals. So the opportunities are out there, and we'll talk about equity in NIL in a minute, but don't assume that because you're in an Olympic sport or you're not the best athlete on the team that there isn't opportunities for you. With regards to dues, you probably want to obtain some sort of legal advice or have a better understanding of just the legalities of your legal agreement. Make sure that you know that if it's exclusive or non-exclusive. The other thing is you should always disclose your NIL activities to your school and compliance officers, and they're also there to help you. And then finally, there are certain categories like alcohol, cigarettes, and gambling that you're prohibited from doing deals with. So just some initial do's and don'ts with regards to NIL. So with that, I want to start a conversation around the evolving NIL ecosystem. And this is kind of my interpretation of it, and it changes. And I think the biggest takeaway from this is that no matter what, the student athlete has to be the most important part of the ecosystem. And if they're not in the center of the ecosystem or at the top of the ecosystem, we're doing something wrong. So we have a really huge opportunity at this point. NIL is less than 2 years old. People on this call, other people kind of driving the industry, have the ability to really forge what it looks like in the future. And I think we need to make sure that the student athlete is always at the center of it. That being said, there are a lot of other entities that are involved in kind of NIL activities. And I've tried to denote where the money is coming from in this. And I think early on, people just assumed the money would show up. But there's really kind of 4 distinct areas: fans, brands, collectives, and boosters. And then at the highest level, the school. You can see those entities highlighted in green. That's where the money would come from. And then I kind of have school as this darker green. And I think this is an ever evolving kind of topic. And we'll probably see that potentially turn green in the future. And this is outside of scholarships, outside of financial aid. This is true just NIL. You can see that the NCAA is highlighted in blue. They're kind of the governing body. And then also, I think as this evolves, we'll see more state and federal regulation. They're kind of outside of this little circle of trust right now. But I thought it was interesting to just add them and make sure that they're accounted for in this. And then there's all of this stuff here that kind of falls under the school. You've got the general counsel of the school that is involved in some cases. You've got the athletic department, coaches, compliance department, and then compliance platforms and exchanges and marketplaces. And if you're not familiar with that, there are different platforms out there today that help with the support of compliance activities. And then there's also exchanges and marketplaces. And these are companies like Open Doors and Influencer, where student athletes can interact with brands, collectives, fans to do NIL activities. And then I thought smaller in some cases, and this is not, I don't think this is the norm, but there are agents involved in this ecosystem as well. So there's a lot of people trying to do a lot of things in NIL, and we'll get to that in a second. But there's also some other areas of impact that are impacting this system or the ecosystem. And they are things like Title IX and financial aid and scholarships, the transfer portal, donors, and Alston Award money. They're not necessarily 100% of the ecosystem, and we'll have a quick discussion around this as well, and why or why not. And then there's other services that I think need to be in place to really make sure that the ecosystem is thriving and that the student athlete is well taken care of. And those are things like financial literacy and nutrition resources and just overall NIL education. In a little bit, we'll talk about some tricks and tips for NIL and maximizing that. And I think we can dive into sharing of knowledge when we get to that. And then obviously mental health support is something that is also very, very important. So as of March 8th, 2023 at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night, this is one way to view the ecosystem. Now, if you just take a step back, it is complete chaos. And as you can see, I don't even have every dot on here. And there's just a lot going on with this ecosystem right now. So I want to just open it up real quick to a 2-minute conversation to see if anybody has any thoughts on this view, or if there's anything else you would add to the ecosystem. Is there anyone willing to kind of raise their hand and say, give us some thoughts on this? Or drop it in the chat maybe? And I can't see the chat.
Katie, I'm wondering, can you explain more about the role of the agent?
I can't. So I think the reason why I've kind of put the agent out to the side and smaller is not everybody has an agent and not everyone needs an agent. And so I think where there's lots of dollars at stake and potentially professional aspirations, that's where agents come into play. I don't see them as a huge part of the ecosystem. So to kind of further that, you don't need an agent to do an NIL deal or take advantage of NIL activities. So, all right.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I have a question about collectives, actually. Do you know of any collectives that exist that are for like all sports or like not the big three, essentially? Because the only experience I've had with them have been just for football and men's and women's basketball. So I was just curious if it existed outside of that realm or if that's pretty much where they're at right now.
Yeah, so great question, and thanks for that. I think collectives are an ever evolving topic within NIL. Last year at this time, I think there were about 65. When I last checked about a month and a half ago, there were over 200. So there's been an exponential growth in college collectives. And with that, and I actually just read an article, I think yesterday, the day before, that a number of collectives are folding. So to address your initial question, there are many schools that are looking at collectives outside of just basketball, men's basketball, football, and women's basketball. And there's also schools that have multiple collectives, and they may have a collective that is for all sports and then one that's for a specific sport, or a couple that are for specific. Now, the collectives are separate entities outside of the university, or they should be separate entities outside of the university. And so I think it varies by school, and it varies by the people that are funding those collectives. So, all right, let's move on, unless if anyone has a burning desire or burning thought around this ecosystem. Okay, let's talk equity in NIL. So obviously the topic of our discussion today, as you can see here, all these athletes on here are all honorarium athletes. And as we start this conversation, I'm very happy to say that at this point in time, we have about 50-50 with male and female athletes on our platform. And over the last 2 months since we launched, we are paying out about 50-50 to student athletes. So our NIL dollars being paid to student athletes is 48% women and 51% male. So that's something we're really proud about, and just really excited to see where we go as a company. And so with that, we'll have a little bit of a conversation around equity. With that, I want to first define equity. So there is a difference between equality and equity. And equality is where everything is equal. And a lot of the data we'll look at it is around equality and just the numbers in general. But equity is where we're meeting people where they are to make sure that everyone is benefiting. So you can kind of see it in these two images. This is where everyone is equal, and this is where everyone has the resources to thrive. So with that, and maybe drop it in the chat, is NIL equitable? Leanne, is that anyone dropping anything into the chat? No. Okay. So let's look at some numbers. I want to start with these 3 data points: $65, 68.5%, and 39%. In 2022, the median income for NIL compensation across Division I athletes was $65. So it sounds like a good night out, but at the end of the day, it's a little bit of money for not everyone really being able to benefit in ways that I think they can in the future. If we look at the next data point, 68.5%, let's just round it up and say 70%. That's the amount of money that's going to football and men's basketball. So at the end of the day, there are two sports making 75 or 70% of the dollars in NIL today. And that takes us to our last number, 39. So that means that 39 other NCAA sanctioned sports are working with 30% of the NIL dollars that are out there today. So equality versus equity, it's not very equal today. And we hear in the news and we hear these great stories that women are doing awesome in NIL. But at the end of the day, they're really only making about 20% of the NIL dollars. So not to discourage people, I think there are still lots of opportunities, and we'll talk about the equity of it all. But it's harder, I think, for women and sports where they are not revenue generating to make NIL dollars. So as you think about the information that's out there and what the headlines are saying, you may want to just dive a little deeper. And this is a headline that I found, or a graph I found from CNBC that I actually found a little bit comical. It was saying, you know, all the money is going to the men, to football and men's basketball, but look, most of the sports in the top 10 are women. This goes back to this data, and the sports making money for women in the top 10 sports is a little over 20%. So just make sure when you're hearing kind of the sound bites that we understand, and this is a Women's Day discussion, that there's still a lot of work that has to happen. And I think we have a lot of opportunities to do that. We have the opportunity to be the voice and do different things to really help promote that. And I think there are systems and things in place right now that are really trying to bolster women's sports. And we do know that there was an increase by 20% in spend for women NIL activities in the first part of 2022. So we are seeing those numbers go up, but at the end of the day, there is still only 20% of the dollars really going to women's sports. And this is just another breakdown of where the money is going. As you can see, a little over 31% is all the other sports. If you break that down at just the Division I level, there's 192,000 Division I athletes. Out of those athletes, we'll just round it to say between football and men's basketball, there's about 30,000 athletes. So if you look at those numbers too, 16% of the athletes are making 70% of the dollars. So not to scare anybody or not to deter people from opportunities within NIL, but I think it's good to kind of understand the numbers as they stand today. So with that, I also want to look at the divisions, and less than 2 years in, there is not a lot of data on the breakdown of dollars by division. And there's still a lot of conflicting data and narratives around this as well. And hopefully if we have this conversation a year from now, there'll be much more data than there is today. But there's really three takeaways across the divisions. At the end of the day, the majority of the NIL deals are going to Division I athletes. There's almost no data on Division II at this point. And then at the Division III level, the majority of athletes getting deals are men. That being said, there is opportunities, and I think if we talk about equity and meeting people where they're at, there are opportunities for NIL across all genders, all divisions, and I think with this being the infancy of NIL and and the industry, we have the opportunity now to change that. And it's easier to change it at the beginning than it is 5 or 10 years from now. So I think with the people on the call today, take this information and share it out, and we can come up with ideas on how to make it better. And with that, does anyone have any ideas or want to talk about how they think we could make NIL more equitable?
I guess this has been my burning question, Katie, of like, we see the issues and obviously something like honorarium is working towards that. So can you maybe tell a bit to the crowd a bit more about honorarium? I think that'd be interesting to hear about and how you guys have worked towards this.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that really leads into kind of tips for maximizing NIL and maximizing equity in NIL. So we can talk about these in a second, but with regards to honorarium, and thanks for that segue, Leanne, I kind of forgot to tell you guys, I'm the CEO of Honorarium. I'm not necessarily here to sell our company, but we have a really unique and interesting story, and we're doing some really cool things within the NIL space. So myself, I was an executive at FanDuel, which is a sports betting company. I also worked very closely with the Division I university and had college athletics oversight and on some things, and became very interested in NIL prior to the NCAA saying, hey, we'll let athletes benefit from their own name, image, and likeness. And after thinking about it and really looking at, how does everyone benefit from NIL, I came up with the idea for honorarium. And what we do at honorarium is we are a fan to player application that allows fans to compensate student athletes for content. And we're also working to democratize the compensation of student athletes. So when an athlete is honored on our platform, they get 75% of those dollars, and then the rest of the money is shared with their teammates and all athletes at that school. So then another 5% is shared with the kids on the team, and then another 5% is shared with the rest of the kids on the platform. And then we take a percentage of that for operations. So it's a really great opportunity. I think one thing that we didn't really talk about in the ecosystem of NIL is really the fans and the fans' part in this. And as we look at the equitable side of this, is I think fans have the opportunity to really help drive earnings for student athletes. And that's what we're really leaning into at Honorarium. So as a student athlete, you sign up for our platform and you are able to post content. Think of it as a social media platform for student athletes only, and where you can recruit your fans to really cheer for you and celebrate you. And instead of getting likes and hearts like you do on other platforms, we're turning those into dollars. So it's really an opportunity for you to monetize your social media and the content that you're creating. So that's really what we're doing at Honorarium. We're very excited about where the company is going. Like I said, we're really trying to build an inclusive community, and making sure that all athletes benefit from their own name, likeness, and image. So that's honorarium. With regards to kind of tips for maximizing NIL and making it more equitable, I think the first one really is we have the opportunity to be the industry and be the advocates for it. So there's new information coming out every day. I think it is very important for whether you're a student athlete or a coach or a school administrator to kind of be a voice in the industry and make sure that you're driving the industry forward. The second point to that is knowledge is power. The more information you know, the more you can kind of cut through what is kind of lip service and what is real will be powerful as we move through NIL and as NIL grows. And then the next point is not every school has the same resources. And so this is where I think we have an opportunity to share information. And outside of this conversation, I'm always happy to have a conversation with anyone who wants to talk NIL. I think that it is really important that everyone has the ability to kind of learn. And so in the space where we can share information and share resources with each other, we're going to get better. And that's where we become the industry and become the advocates. And then the next point is be innovative. And we're going to hear from our special guests in a minute. But we are really at the start of this. And we talked about the collectives for a little bit, and we're seeing them. We saw the rise and we may see a fall. Not anything is set in stone. So we really have the opportunity to be innovative at this point in time. I've been fortunate enough to be part of two industries that we're brand new, that being e-commerce and sports betting. And there are times where we would just throw things on the wall and see what stuck. So if you're nervous about diving into NIL opportunities, or you are wondering if there's something that no one's ever tried before and you think it might be a good idea, do that. And then the next point is kind of along the point of being innovative. Recently, I've heard a number of schools, and this is more from a supporting student athletes and giving them more opportunities to leverage their name, image, and likeness. So we talked a little bit about the marks and logos. What we are hearing from different schools, and I just thought this was really cool, and that's why I put it on here. It's a little bit different. Schools are now, when they're doing team pictures, they're giving student athletes blank uniforms and school colors without their jersey, without the marks on it, and doing images and pictures and assets so that they are able to then utilize those stock photos for NIL activities. So that's just something that I've heard recently that I thought was really cool and worth sharing. And then we've already talked about leveraging fans. I think fans are going to be a really big part of the success of student athletes in NIL, and we haven't even scratched the surface yet. And that's why I think platforms like Honorarium are super important. And so with that, I was going to kind of give you the overview of Honorarium, but we've already talked about that. So with the people on the call, are there other ways that you think you can maximize NIL?
Maybe kind of as, can you guys also hear me? I put my AirPods in. Okay, great. Maybe also as we're kind of moving into our panel, if you want to drop in the chat for the people who said that they are using it, maybe how are you using it? Because I'm definitely interested to, especially since I see some campus captains' names. Curious to see how you're using it.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. Was that all good?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think we can
Perfect.
pass it on to our campus panel.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. That was super interesting. I really appreciate that. And I do see some thoughts coming in the chat now. We can, perfect. Great. So I'm super excited to drop to our students and our entrepreneurs here. Today we have Sabrina, Ellie, and Megan, and they are all really inspiring young women that I just got to meet recently or got to meet today. I got to meet Megan for the first time today. So I'm really excited to hear more from them and what they do. So if you guys want to just start maybe with a little bit about who you are and kind of your elevator pitch of what you do, and then we'll jump into some of those questions. So if anyone wants to kick us off.
Sure, I'll kick us off. I first have to apologize for my background. It keeps going in and out. It's super weird. So I'm self-conscious about it, but it's fine. So hi everybody. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Ellie Haney. I am 24 years old. I was a 2020 graduate at the University of Delaware. And I'm the founder of Hainsey Clothing, which is my own clothing brand. So I also live in Fairfield, Connecticut, with my twin brother and my parents. So my clothing brand is all about having a mission to spread mental health awareness through fashion by offering trendy and comfortable pieces of clothing, sharing messages of love, hope, and positivity. I'm actually wearing one of my favorite pieces right here, the Here For You white crew neck. So my brand is also best known for my Here For You embroidered hoodie and or crew neck. So also in addition to spending my days, running a small startup business and all the craziness of that, I have also begun sharing my personal mental health journey with high schools, universities, and community groups. My message mostly focuses on depression, anxiety, social media, substance abuse, and suicidal ideations. I've experienced a lot of mental health issues my whole life and have very recently become extremely vocal about everything. And I find that sharing my struggles with others really opens up the conversation, and it's kind of proof that we all need each other and that it's better to talk and there's no reason to hide. So yeah, mostly my speeches that I've been saying is how I struggle, or how I have struggled and how I will always struggle, but how I choose to live and how what has helped me kind of throughout my journey. So the end of my elevator pitch, I have also had great success speaking with athletic teams at high schools and universities, mostly on the East Coast, since I'm from Connecticut. And I become extremely involved and excited when my story allows an athlete to open up or somebody on the team to open up about unspoken struggles that their other teammates might not have not even known that they were going through. And my hope is that when somebody, anybody, a stranger, an athlete, whoever you are, sees, one of my Here For You hoodies, it reminds them that they're not alone and that they're part of a community that supports them and that you can get through anything.
I love it. Thanks, Ellie. Let's kick it to Meg.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Hannah. I actually work with Katie at Honorarium. I've been working with her remotely since this summer. I'm a senior at St. Bonaventure University, and I actually played Division I soccer here for 3 years. But I did not play this past season, so for my senior year. And I don't really have a big pitch. That's pretty much it. That's all about me.
Yeah, you can tell us more about Honorarium in a bit, but thanks, Megan. Sabrina.
Yeah, hi everyone. Super excited to be here. Like Elizabeth, I have a clothing business. I founded It's Urban Wave Embroidery. Founded in 2022 amidst COVID, pandemic, kind of arts and crafts turned business. And the last year I've really focused on reaching out into the mental health space. I also struggled with depression and anxiety during COVID, just amidst the pandemic, not playing well. Forgot to mention I play soccer at the University of Iowa. And I'm a senior here, so it's my last season. So during my sophomore year, I was really struggling with depression, anxiety, just getting through struggles with my sport, injury, online school, everything really came kind of crashing down. So I'm trying to turn my business, which was mostly just focused on custom embroidery, towards this mental health focus. And now I'm promoting a lot of body positivity clothing, mental health clothing, anything like that. Everything's made in-house. I have a little machine that sits on my desk, little L desk, where I do homework on one side and embroidery on the other. So I can kind of multitask. And yeah, that's pretty much it about me, I think.
I love it. I love it. Thanks for sharing. Let's start with maybe some NIL kind of question to Meg. So from your student athlete perspective, and you're kind of maybe the most engaged in this NIL sphere with your work with Honorarium, from your perspective, how does NIL kind of change the game of college sports?
So I think Katie kind of touched on a lot of this earlier, but I think that NIL gives opportunities to all student athletes. It's not just people at those big schools. I know we talked about that's where the majority of the money's going, but it doesn't matter whether you're a Division 1, 2, 3 athlete, or whether or not your sport is extremely popular, you can still capitalize on these NIL deals. And it's all about really finding a company or a brand to partner with that you believe in and something that you're proud to represent. And I think that it's really great that student athletes now have the opportunity to do that. Just because before you weren't really able to share with your maybe social media followers or the people around you if you really supported something because you didn't want to get in trouble with compliance. So I think it changes college sports in that way. And it just gives a lot of new opportunities that weren't available before.
And Meg, follow-up question, do you see students on your campus at St. Bonaventure kind of capitalizing?
Yeah, totally. At least my old team, specifically the women's soccer team here, a lot of them did partnerships with like different like beverage companies. It was usually like Celsius or Liquid IV. I know they do a lot of that type of partnerships. So it's mostly promoting different products and things like that. People are definitely interested in it, but not everybody. It's just kind of a select few people that really capitalize on it. But when they do, it seems like they get a lot out of it.
Cool. I'm laughing because I coach lacrosse in the spring, and my team is obsessed with Celsius, and my head coach and I tell them to stop drinking Celsius before
Right?
games.
Yeah, I
It is
know.
not proper nutrition to be drinking Celsius. You need water.
I
I'm gonna have
know.
to tell my girls that. Cool. Serena, another question we had pre-prepared. Not every school provides the same type of NIL education. And I think obviously, as we've seen, those bigger schools tend to have more resources. So we've been wondering what kind of like information has Iowa shared with you, or was it kind of just something that you started venturing down yourself? Tell us a little bit about Iowa's preparation versus your own kind of exploration of NIL.
Yeah, so Iowa has done a lot more recently. I think in the beginning, like everyone else, they were kind of confused about what they were allowed to promote, what they weren't. But recently they've been doing a lot of financial literacy specifically, which is something that Katie brought up earlier, which I thought was really smart. Because that's a huge part of NIL deals in general, is that we all want money. We're college students. And so that was something that I thought was really important, was just getting to know like what kind of preparation you need to do to be ready for the outside world, what kind of money that we need to start preparing for housing in the future, paying off our loans, if we have any stuff like that. And then as well as just, they encourage us a lot to just go out into the community and just like talk to people, ask for deals like your favorite coffee shop or a local nutrition store, stuff like that. They just encourage us to use those sort of resources. Support like Jenna, or sorry, not Jenna, I don't know why I said that, Megan said, just support what you like and what you usually use and do. And then another thing that they have also supported is like the open doors platforms, stuff like that. And just putting your name out there on all those sites, applying to everything that you can, as long as it's something that you support and believe in.
That's awesome. And those are like those financial literacy courses, are those just for student athletes?
Yes.
Interesting. Cool. So they're preparing the Hawkeyes pretty well.
Yeah.
Let's jump a little bit to Sabrina and Ellie, kind of a little bit more about how and why you started your company. So I guess we kind of got your why, but maybe that first push, if someone's like thinking about starting a company, like what kind of things should they be thinking about? Let's start with maybe Ellie.
Sure. I kind of very similar to Sabrina. I started at the beginning of COVID, pretty much like with creating, designing, thrifting, clothing was a real big outlet for me. At the beginning of COVID, when, somebody who struggles with mental health to begin with, put COVID on top of that, and just it's a nightmare. And so creating and designing clothing really was such an outlet for me that I was almost amazed by how much it helped me. And so that was really my inspiration to start a business, because I was like, oh my God, I want to share this with the world because this is helping me so much. I want to freaking scream this at the top of my lungs that you can really help yourself and you can live a better life and you can get through these issues. And so that was really my, my personal kind of struggle from like personal strength from struggle. And I think that I am like inspired on a daily basis from my customers to keep going. And just there's such an inspiration. Like some of my favorite things that some of my customers and just audience have said to me is, your sweatshirt got me out of bed this morning. I thought I was the only one going through this. This is the first time I've ever felt seen. So I just think that if you back your business with a passion and you're never going to fail, because even if you impact one person on a daily basis, it's everything.
Yeah, I love
I don't know
that.
if I just answered the question. But.
No, that's okay. It was a bit about why and how you started your company.
Okay.
Sabrina, tell us a bit more about your how, I guess, maybe. So we kind of got your
Yeah.
why too, but a little bit more of your
Yeah.
how.
So I love the passion behind Ellie. Everything that she does is amazing. I just kind of want to emphasize that you can have impacts in different ways. And that's kind of what I've been doing with my business in the last few years, is that I know that I do not have like the mental health platform that I necessarily wanted, but I'm also aware that I'm still building and growing my company. So just want to put it out that it's like not a right away thing. This like takes work and effort, but the first thing you have to do is just start. Honestly, like I started hand embroidering things. They took 5 to 6 hours each, and I would just sit on my couch every night in front of the TV and just do them as fast as I could. And then I was pitching. That's a really big thing that I should have mentioned. I was also working on teaching us how to pitch ourselves and our business. And you can enter pitch competitions at your school, locally, in the state. They're all around. Enter a pitch competition. That's how I won the money to get a bigger machine, which helps me do more clothing per day and just kind of up the quality of my pieces. And yeah, just invest in the process, know that it takes time, and just be willing to work hard at it, I guess. That's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for sharing that. I'm thinking about, Victoria and I founded the Hidden Opponent. Well, Victoria founded the Hidden Opponent and I joined her about 6 months after she founded it. And so much of it is just a grind. So, THO is still in its infancy too. And it's so much of just late nights and trying to figure things out and, getting frustrated when things don't work, but learning from it. And I think that's the case for every small thing that turns into a big thing. Awesome. Meg, you are a former D1 athlete, still an undergrad, got a couple more months, and you've been working for Honorarium. What advice would you give to student athletes as they kind of maneuver this sphere? So maybe an athlete on the call right now that's a little unsure, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I think my main advice I kind of touched on earlier, but it's just to make sure whoever you're partnering with, you really believe in them. Like you believe in their message. You don't want to start promoting a company or a product or something and then come to find out you're supporting something that really doesn't fit with your own personal beliefs or values. And then I think someone also threw this in the chat earlier, but it's something I was going to say is just to use your compliance officers at your school, because there's these people that's their job, they want to help you, and if you ever have any questions, it doesn't ever hurt to be extra cautious or take a little extra time before making a decision or signing a deal.
Good point. Good point. And you can easily find those people through your athletic department. So definitely, if you don't know who your compliance people are, go find them. Great resource. I think this kind of goes with the conversation of authenticity, but social media obviously is a huge part of this conversation, right? We talk about this at the Hidden Opponent all the time. Victoria, my partner, talks about this all the time of, how to be real on social media, how to be authentic on social media, but also the reality of it is it is a tool to promote. It is a tool to, market. So I guess a question for Sabrina, for Ellie, kind of how have you used social media? How are you navigating this sphere with both like being authentic, but also recognizing that part of your business is to be using this?
So for me personally, I am not a huge, like being completely honest, I'm not a huge social media fan. I use it every single day for my business, but a lot of my anxiety, depression, mental health issues come from social media. So and I'm very vocal about that on social media. So I really try to, for my own personal mental, only be on social for a couple posts and stories a day because it really does take a lot out of me. But the biggest piece of advice that I could give for social media is show up completely authentically yourself. I swear that is a big reason why people support my business and buy hoodies from me, because and again, no shame or shade to anybody who does this, but I don't use filters. I don't edit my stuff really. I am very, very authentic, and I'll post videos of myself like getting stains out of some of our sweatshirts, or I get on and I'm like, I had a really bad day. Like my ex-boyfriend won't talk to me. Like my depression is really bad today. And I think people really respect that they see a business owner, somebody who quit their corporate job to, that believes in her brand so much and just shows up authentically as herself. It's like kind of a breath of fresh air from regular social media. So I found that the second I put my face on like my Instagram story or Facebook or wherever you are with your business, or just as an athlete or wherever you are, just showing your real self and what you're eating for dinner or what you're struggling with that day. It's people just want to connect with real people. Nobody wants to see fakeness. We already have enough of that in everyday life. So just being real and authentic and showing up as you is the best piece of advice that I could give.
Awesome. Sabrina, you were
I would
sharing a little
agree.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with that. One of my favorite like things to post on my stories are when the embroidery is not going well, when I have this pile of thread that I've had to like pull out of my machine and hoodie because it's just not behaving. Because like, it happens, like nothing like works out exactly the way you want it to. I was making a day in the life video and I had come back from like drying my hair and my machine was all like clogged up and like the thread was everywhere. And I was like, what the heck? But I was like, you know what, I'm gonna throw it in there. Like it kind of works. And I think that's something that I've started incorporating more recently. And I really like how I don't have to like fake kind of that goodness all the time. Like it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like things go wrong. Like I have to like buy new sweatshirts because like I messed up this one. So I think that it's very important to just be yourself, like show the like bad side of business almost sometimes. Yeah, to show that you're human, honestly.
Yeah, totally. I got a personal question to my DMs. So an anonymous question, but I think this speaks to a lot of what we're talking about too. Like, were either of you like scared to kind of start this, and how did you kind of overcome that fear of, the what if, like, what are people going to say, or what if this fails? How did you kind of overcome that, if you were scared at all?
Yeah, I was absolutely terrified. I still suffer from anxiety. I'm figuring all this out. I have this issue like thinking or constantly thinking about what other people are going to think of me. So I was like, what if people don't like my clothing? What if people judge me for having this business? Like what are they going to think about me? I for a long time like never told anyone that I like had this business, and like only sold to like strangers on the internet that like I met through Instagram. And it's like, it took me a long time to get over that. But honestly, like I've had just so much fun doing my business. Like, this is what I love doing. I love like creating these things. It's like, yeah, it's like digital plus physical art kind of intertwined, and I love it. And I'm learning that since I love it, this is my passion now. Like, I need to share it with other people. Like, I have this opportunity to do this amazing thing. I like get to share this with other people. And that's kind of the mindset that I'm trying to implement more. I'm still not great at it. I still like will not tell people sometimes, like when I have an opportunity, but I just encourage you to tell yourself that you get to do this awesome thing, or that you can do this awesome thing that you should share with other people, because it's really cool and can be really impactful on people.
Totally. Ellie, I don't know if you want to hop in. Yeah.
Totally. I'll just say a couple more words. I completely agree with Sabrina. I think that's incredible advice, that you have, this gift and this creativity or whatever the hell you have. Everybody has something different that, the person before you can't offer. Everybody has something unique that, you were put on this earth to uphold. And I think that what I found is I'm terrified on a daily basis of everything that comes from owning a small business, but I also, the amount of passion that I've found from stepping into this new realm of my life is just so overwhelming and exciting, that I'm like, kind of like Sabrina said, you have this gift that it would be a waste if you didn't step into it. And I just always think about, in 10 years, if I looked back and again, there's absolutely like no judgment or shade to anybody who does this, but for me, the corporate world just wasn't for me. And if I, like, 10 years down the line, I look back and I'm still like in an office, I would feel regret. And I can't, the fear and the stress and the anxiety on a daily basis of running a business based on passion is, it's, no matter how hard it gets, it's worth it, because there's no regrets involved. So, and it's okay
Totally.
to feel fear. That's a normal human emotion. Just don't hide it.
Yeah, totally. No, I'm laughing thinking about how similar to Sabrina, people, so I have a full-time job, and then I also do the Hidden Opponent, and the Hidden Opponent's like my passion project. And I often don't bring up that I run the Hidden Opponent, even like to in conversations where it's relevant to bring it up, right? Because I'm like, I have that imposter syndrome, or, I teach high schoolers. So high schoolers will often know Victoria, and I'll be like, oh yeah, like I know her. I don't say, she's my co-partner at our nonprofit or whatever it is. So I totally feel that. I think imposter syndrome is real, but it's also really awesome to like find those moments of confidence and those moments to bring it into conversation. For me, it took a lot of practice of just being like, yeah, actually I run a nonprofit, and they'd be like, oh, what's your nonprofit for? Right. And kind of, it's like a practice, it's a muscle you got to work and kind of get used to, just like you have to practice your pitch, right? And similarly, I am really want to get better at videography, specifically sports videography, but I've been super nervous. So I've just had my camera sitting there for like months through the pandemic, not being used. And I finally started picking it up, and it's not perfect right now, but I hope one day it'll get better. So I'm feeling super inspired by what y'all are saying. I'll wrap us up with give me one woman that inspires you. So it can be anyone. I asked all my lacrosse players the same question today, and I got all sorts of answers, but one woman that inspires you, and maybe why.
I can go first. Just my mom, honestly. She came from nothing and worked to build an amazing life for herself and our family. And has given so much for me to be in this position, drove me all my soccer games growing up, sacrificed in her professional career for my brother and I, and continues to support me as I go into this crazy business and college and even into grad school. So yeah.
Love it.
I'd have to copy Sabrina and say my mom as well. She owns her own small business and has inspired me to open my own and follow my dreams, and also is the reason why I'm here today, has helped me through all my mental health issues, has encouraged me to be sober. Is just the best. Like I was like trying to think of something else to say, like, so I wouldn't copy Sabrina, but there's just nobody else like my mom. So
Fair enough.
I guess I'll go. I mean, no hate to my mom, definitely my mom, but I'll go with my grandma. She's 92 years old. I probably comes to mind because I just saw her this weekend, but she has like I'm the youngest of 20 grandkids. She had 5 sons. I think that's just crazy. She is just a huge role model for everybody in my family, and so I'll go grandma.
Katie, how about you? I think you're on mute.
So I think family is super important. Like Megan, I have 21 first cousins. My mom is one of 9, and every single woman in our family was a powerhouse. My one aunt was the CTO of a large Fortune 50 company and was, one of the first female tech executives. My mom is amazing, and like I could go down. So I think this group is fortunate to have internal female role models, but I think there's a lot of other people out there. It's hard when you're put on the spot. I think in other presentations I usually say my mom and her sisters. So they are who they made me who I am. So
Totally. I would have to agree with all the same. I think inspiring women make more inspiring women. So I'd have to agree. Let's end with, where can we find out more about you all? And if people have more questions or want to support your business, where can they find y'all?
So my Instagram is, I'm going to drop it in the chat too. It's just Hainsey Clothes. My website is linked right in my bio as well, which on my website, you can find my podcast, my resources, everything. So I just always like send people to Instagram because the link is right in the bio. So I will drop that in the chat. Thank you guys.
I also just dropped my stuff in the chat. It's just, I have an Etsy, please visit. And then also my Instagram is just urban_wave_embroidery. And it was really hard to spell, so it's in the chat. And yeah, all my links and everything are in there as well.
and then I would encourage any student athlete that's interested in NIL or in honorarium, visit our website. It's honorariumnil.com. We'll drop it in there. I'm always open to a discussion if there's more information. I know we covered a lot of information on NIL in a short period of time. If anyone is ever open to a conversation, happy to do that. And also, Megan is our student athlete coordinator. So she is talking to hundreds of student athletes on a weekly basis. And so if you're a student athlete and you want to learn more, Megan can talk about herself too, but
Yeah. I guess if you want to DM me, I can put my Instagram.
yeah, she's
But,
basically talked with over 8,000 student athletes since August, and has helped a lot of student athletes kind of maneuver NIL. And then from a honorarium standpoint, we'd love to have you on the platform. And if you are a school administrator, happy to have a conversation. What we didn't cover is there's no cost to a school. We don't charge universities or colleges for our services, like other platforms that are out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. I know I'm feeling super inspired by especially our young women in the room. I think it's really awesome to see people my age doing really awesome things. And thank you, Katie, for kind of educating us deeper on this really interesting sphere. I'm really excited to see where we go next. And I appreciate that you kind of prompted that in your presentation of questioning what's next for us as women and as athletes and as people in this NCAA sphere. So thank you all for being here. I hope you guys have a happy International Women's Day. And this recording will be on YouTube. So keep an eye out and send it to your friends for further education. Looking forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye.